Hey everybody, today we are in the first half of John chapter 6, which is a really amazing chapter where John drops these not so subtle hints to the reader and to the audience about who the person of Jesus really is. So let's jump in and take a look at a few of these stories and try to unravel what these major hints could be. The chapter begins with Jesus feeding the 5,000. And there's a slightly different detail that gets added here that's not in the other versions of the gospel. And that's in verse 4, which seems like a throwaway line. So it says, the Jewish Passover festival was near. That's it. Just one line. And whenever you see things that you think are just completely random, you should probably ask yourself, why is this in here? Is this just sort of random background detail, or what is it? And for John, it's never random. In fact, in most of the Bible, this information is never random. So we get told that Jesus goes to a mountainside, he sits down with his disciples, a crowd shows up, they're hungry. Jesus says, hey, let's feed these people. The disciples protest, they say, where are we going to get this food? And then they find someone who has loaves and fish, and they distribute more than enough to feed everybody, and they have leftovers. And then we get this little line that says in verse 14, after this, the people saw the sign that Jesus performed. They began to say, surely this is the prophet who's come into the world. And Jesus, knowing what they had intended, to make him king by force, withdrew to a mountain by himself, which is a very strange thing to do, right? Why would here in this crowd people see this miracle of Jesus, dividing this food and feeding everybody and having leftovers, that they want to make him king by force? What would make them do that? Well, that goes back to verse 4 about this little random line about the Jewish Passover festival. So what is the Passover? Well, we can rewind all the way back to the book of Exodus, where God delivers his people, the Jews, from Egypt, from slavery, with all these plagues and signs and wonders. And the last plague was the plague of the firstborn, where God instructed his people to sacrifice a lamb, to paint the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, and the angel of death would pass them by, and that they would be allowed to go free. And while they were doing this, they were supposed to be celebrating a meal, having a meal together of bread. And as they eat this bread, they're given instructions that this is going to be a time that they are to remember forever of how God has delivered them. He's passed over them from death to life. So it's no coincidence that Jesus chooses this day to multiply this bread and feed everybody. And so this crowd instantly recognizes the not so subtle hint that John drops, that the day that this is happening is this major religious festival day, where people look back and remember how God saved his people. He passed over them so that they move from death to life. And it all revolves around this meal of having bread. And so Jesus multiplies this bread, and they instantly recognize there's something to this guy. Let's keep going. The next story, the disciples then get on the boat and they start going across the lake, and Jesus joins them later, but in a really weird fashion. It says he begins walking toward the boat on the water. Verse 19, and they were frightened. Strange, right? They see Jesus. Why would you be frightened? Well, I guess you'd be frightened because, hey, someone walking on the water is a very unusual thing. But in those days, in that time, the water was seen as this place of chaos, of disorder. And so the fact that Jesus was walking on this water meant that he had power over the chaos, over the disorder, and that's a really big deal. Such a big deal, in fact, in verse 20, he says to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Which Just sounds like a normal thing to say, right? Hey guys, it's me. Don't worry. But there's way more packed into those little sentences than we think. So where Jesus says "it is I" in Greek, it's the phrase "ego eimi," which means "I am." Hey guys, I am, which is a strange thing to say. Hey guys, I am. But where have you seen that phrase before? I am. Well, again, you go all the way back to Exodus chapter 3, and Moses finds God in a burning bush, and God says to Moses that I'm going to send you to Egypt, and you're going to set my people free. Moses has all these questions for God, and one of the questions is, well, who should I say is sending me? And God gives him his name, Yahweh, which means I am, or I am who I am. But that's God's name for himself, is I am. And so when Jesus shows up on the lake and he says, hey guys, I am, he's basically giving a not so subtle reference that he and the Father are one. They're God. And then, to follow that up, just as an extra little cherry on top, he says, do not be afraid. In the Bible, this is one of the most repeated commands that we see, and it's often given when an angel of God shows up, or God himself shows up to bring some really good news. And the people who see God's presence or his angel or whatever, they're living in fear because this is a strange thing that's happening, right? This heavenly being appearing before us, and they're afraid. They think they're going to die. And every time God or the angel representing God says, don't be afraid. So Jesus here throws out two really not so subtle references to who he really is. It is I am, don't be afraid. Fast forward to the story, and then our little section today ends with a conversation where Jesus is talking to a crowd of people, and Jesus tells them not to live for things that don't matter, for food that spoils, but to live for things that endure toward eternal life. And the crowd says, well, what should we do? What is that? And Jesus says, believe in the one that God has sent. And then, strangely enough, they say, well, give us a sign. Well, prove it to us that you are the one that God sent, and then we'll believe in you. And then Jesus says, look, you guys depended on all these things in the past, like the bread that came from Moses, but was here today and then gone tomorrow. But I know of a bread that lasts forever, that you'll eat and you'll never be hungry again. You'll drink from this fountain and you'll never be thirsty again. And then they say, sir, always give us this bread. And then Jesus reminds them that the bread is him. He's it. He's the one. That the same one who multiplied this bread as a sign during the Passover, which he is the one that rescues and delivers. That's him. The same one that walks on water, who says, I am, don't be afraid. He's the one. He's the one where all the promises of God come true. He's the one that can sustain us forever. He's the one that fills us up when nothing else will satisfy. Believe in him. You think this makes a pretty good story and a pretty good ending, but as we'll see tomorrow, it doesn't work out that way, because we as people don't want to believe. We think that we want to have a better reason, that there's something else out there that we want to subscribe to. But Jesus makes it really clear, and John, in the way he words it in his not so subtle way, Jesus is God. He's the one that we're going to find everything that we need and more. So don't turn to anything else, but place yourself, your trust, your faith in him and him alone, and you will eat and always be satisfied. May you go and internalize those words this week. See you later.